Hello and welcome to the 2021 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Bryan, Loar, General Manager of Cover to Cover Children's Books in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Spotlight on Children's Books. We'd like to thank our festival partners and sponsors, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. Today, we're joined by a wonderful panel. Thank you, Rebecca Greenfield, Kate Hoefler, Mark Miesse, Samuel Narh, and Frank Tupta for being here. So we're going to start off with some quick bios and then jump right into discussion. A little later, we'll open up to audience Q&A. So if you're out in the audience right now, please ask your questions in our Q&A feature or chat. We'll start off with Rebecca Greenfield. She is a certified nuclear medicine technologist who carries a master's degree in theological studies. She has an unrelenting fire in her bones to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to others through the power of written art. Duster Knuffle is her first picture book. Learn more at rebecca-greenfield.com. Kate Hoefler received her MFA in poetry from the University of Michigan, where she studied as a Colby Fellow. Her newest book is Nothing in Common, and her newest obsession is with her children's chickens. And I have to say, I have a bit of that obsession too. We have some chickens of our own. Mark Miesse is an up-and-coming author with a current focus on children's poetry. His poetry is focused around younger children up to the tween years. Samuel Narh was born and raised in Ghana. He is a natural storyteller and author of several picture books. A Kite for Malia was co-written by his wife, Frida. Learn more at samuelnarh.com. And then finally, with Frank Tupta. Frank grew up in a haunted house in Cleveland. His favorite holiday is Halloween. He still dresses up every year. I'm totally curious if that changes out every year. He currently lives in Peninsula, Ohio. Learn more at uptosomething.com. Thank you all for being here today. It is great to see you. What a wonderful Saturday morning. I'd love to start off with Frank. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, maybe something that not everybody knows, a little bit about your latest book and what children's literature means to you?
So, something about me that nobody knows. We gave up my haunted house information, that I grew up in a haunted house. Not many people know that.
Yeah.
That's kind of an insider story. Things that nobody, well, not a lot of people know that I do this job, to be honest with you. I was never a big book person. My wife kind of turned me on to it. So I don't know if anybody really knows that Lindsay Ward is my wife, and she's the one that got me into this whole thing. My book is How to Build a Haunted House, obviously based off of personal experience, because that house that we lived in, we had to, let's just say, rebuild. It was an 1830s house, and when we got into it, it didn't have any walls or stairs or any floors, so it had to be completely redone. As far as what children's lit means to me, I grew up with a lot of the classics, but I always liked the off-the-wall stuff. Jimmy's Boa Ate the Wash. I don't know if anybody knows, or yeah, I think it was Jimmy's Boa Ate the Wash, right? That's a favorite of mine, but I always liked the outside-the-box children's lit. And as far as what it means to me, it's giving kids back something that that hopefully they cherish. Like I like those stories, the Where the Wild Things Are, the places, stuff like that that we grew up with in the 80s. That's older than the 80s, but yeah. So.
Well, thanks, Frank. Thanks for sharing. How about you, Kate?
All right, so I'm Kate Hoefler, and I'm going to say the same that you gave away not many people know, although I feel like people know about the chickens now because I've become, maybe because of the pandemic, I've been home 96% of the time, except with the chickens. And so I include that in bios now. That's how socially awkward I am at this point. But they all have people names like Janet and Keith, and they have these nuanced personalities. that I think I didn't notice before, because I sit with chickens more now that I'm home all the time. And being a noticer actually kind of lends itself well in terms of a transition to my latest book, Nothing in Common. And it's a book about being a noticer and about ultimately noticing. I think kind of we've lived through some divisive times, and I think that we hear the phrase "nothing in common" a lot. We all use it. I use it too. Try not to as much now, because I was realizing what a dismissive term it is, because we use it to kind of explain why we're not going to connect with somebody. And so in terms of plot, it's a book about two neighbors who believe they have nothing in common, except for one moment in their days where they notice an old man that maybe other people don't notice, an old man with his dog. And ultimately, when one day is different and the dog's not there, they're the two people who notice that an old man is in pain, and it's enough to connect them, despite their differences. And so the phrase that gets repeated, "nothing in common," kind of loses its power as the book goes on and on. And I think that it also kind of connects to what I love about children's books, which is that they're great connectors, both in terms of how we consume them together and how we begin to view each other differently, and care about each other and care about somebody that's maybe not ourselves.
Yep, absolutely. That's definitely important. We also talk about at Cover to Cover the idea of a shared experience, being able then, if you've read the same book as somebody else, then you have this common bond.
Yes, yes.
Mark, how about you?
Okay, I'm going to embarrass myself a little bit and share something people don't know. So I am the 2014 Durban Bean Bake Wife Calling Champion. So I'll just let you Google all the Durban Bean Bake to find out. It's really rich in history. It was actually started back in the Civil War. But it was just probably the most hillbilly thing I've ever done in my life. But
well, congratulations.
It's not something too many people know, because I don't
awesome.
like to share it. But it's humorous, needless to say. Not too many people can say that. So as far as I guess my book here, I'll show. Hopefully the screen doesn't mess it up too much. But I've got a really long title here. I'll read it for you. I can't remember it sometime. It's called Poems About Unicorns, Superheroes, Princesses, Soccer, The Color Yellow, Dolphins, Green Beans, Video Games, Tools, and the Beach. I really like poetry a lot, and I like the, even the craziness of that title. I like things that interest kids in that way, and that's really a lot of my poetry. This first book that I wrote was all about my children's interests, my actual children, and they actually did the illustrations in there too, so I really made it kind of a family thing. But the other book that I'm writing is kind of around niches that maybe kids aren't, they have parents who aren't really connecting a lot and trying to help them read. So like I've got a book on drywall and plumbing and stuff, but it's poetry form. So it's for the kids that have parents that are in kind of trades, and giving them, hey, this is a way I could connect to my kid and try to help them be interested in reading by reading about my trade. And they're quirky poetry, but they are informational and educational too. I have a whole bathroom remodel poem, so there's a lot of things in there. So I really enjoy trying to, influence kids into things that maybe they're not, exposed to as much, such as trades and things of that sort. So.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the idea of taking something that might seem, whether that's mundane or whether that is a little, where you're actually doing construction, and turning that into a literary art form is pretty incredible. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. Rebecca, how about for you?
Yes, hi, my name is Rebecca Greenfield, and I have, I guess the thing that would not be that known aside from like family and friends is that I am an only child. I am an only grandchild on both sides. I have no first cousins, so I'm super spoiled. And my husband has a lot on his hands with me, I guess. No, I've just had a very fortunate life though, very, very close, tight-knit family. So I'm really grateful for that. But it just happens to be just me. So I wrote the book Dusternuffle, and one of my good friends from way back, I guess, like we went to church together, she was the illustrator for it. And so I wrote this a while ago and had been planning on bringing it out this year, before COVID, before anything with the whole COVID thing had happened. And so it kind of just ended up being timely how it all happened. So the idea is that it's a world within a world, basically. So the village of Dusternuffle is underneath the carpet in the Timber family home. And so they have some, human quakes, and there's a tornadoes that come, which is when the sweeper comes. And then there's like a 30-year hurricane, which is when they're getting their carpet shampooed, the Timber family is. So the problem is that this 30-year hurricane's coming. It's threatening to wipe out the whole village of Dusternuffle. And so how will they survive it? And so they band together with their neighbor Pinewoodians, which are a bunch of spiders. And there's a good ending. I guess I can't give it away, but kind of am. So so that's I guess children's literature. Why is that important to me? I think of like family units a lot. So like I was very fortunate to have a great family, and that I remember my mom reading to me, and I think those are very transformative years. You just learn so much as a child. So I don't have kids, but when I have kids, I say I want them to learn everything before the age of 7, like learn how to ski, because I can't do that very well. Like do all these things before, learn your foreign language, learn everything, and I just think you can learn so much at those ages. And so I think that's the power of literature at that age too.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about the transformative power of literature, and those years are so crucial. Even before the baby's born, being able to read to your child in womb and then from there. So thank you for sharing, Rebecca. And Samuel, how about for you?
Well, my name is Samuel Narh, and I'm originally from Ghana in West Africa. I grew up listening to a lot of Anansi stories. Anansi stories originated in Ghana, and the basic plot is that Anansi is considered in Ghanaian literature as the most intelligent creature in the world. However, he has a very selfish, personality and traits. He's always trying to have an unfair advantage over the rest of the world. These stories are used to develop good moral characters in children, and hopefully they'll grow up to keep those characters so that they can be useful members of the society. Well, I came to the United States when I was about 24 years old. I've been here for close to 17 years. And my experience is that, a lot of stories are not being told here in the States because of the lack of, let's say, foreign authors, right? So my idea is to influence the children's book industry by writing stories which are from my background. A Kite for Malia was written by myself and Frida, and here is a copy of the book. And it's basically about, loss and acceptance. Death is something that people don't like to deal with. In this culture, it's almost like a taboo. Across the world, people don't want to deal with the idea of losing a loved one. However, it's part of life. And this book tries to tell a story which delicately deals with the idea of loss and acceptance.
Thank you so much, Samuel. So kind of going off of that and maybe thinking a little bit about this, Samuel, did you also this year create either an imprint or a publishing company?
Yes, that's true. So A Kite for Malia is published by Chasing a Spider Publishing, which I'm a co-owner of. And we are trying to share stories which are very common in Ghana. We are trying to share it here in the States to help, shape the minds of people and children in the States and across the world. Our stories are meant to touch and, reach people of, any background. And we write stories that matter to people. We want to deal with difficult topics that the industry tries to, avoid. And that's the mission of Chasing a Spider Publishing.
Yeah, thank you, Samuel. So I'm curious, and this is a little bit maybe off our topic, but I'm curious about for the rest of you how you came to being published. Maybe we could start with Frank and describe your journey to being published.
Journey to being published. Write extensively. That is the way. If you're going to do this, I guess that's the way I did it. I wrote a dozen novels before I wrote my first children's book, and that was in like 3 years. So it was just grind it out, because I had never done it before. Use it more as a therapeutic as opposed to as something that was going to be, seen by a lot of people. And as far as the road to that, you're sending out and you're sending out and you're sending out and you're getting no's and no's and no's and no's, and you just have to deal with that and work your way through it. And actually the way that I got the How to Build a Haunted House published was I finally took a break from doing the novel work, and just kind of came to me one day. And obviously I have someone else in the house that is very supportive, is also very talented and beautiful. She's probably watching, so I'm saying very good things right now about her. So she was like, why don't you give this a shot? Why don't you put the other stuff down for a little bit? Let's give this a shot. Helps when you got someone connected. I'm not going to lie to you. But that's how we kind of move forward. And we actually started a company 3 years ago that we do a lot of editorial work, and it's a lot of free editorial work for children's book authors. Kind of a way to give back. The company's called Critterlit. Lindsay started it, and I help her with it. But it's a long road, but it's nice to find out you have help every once in a while, or somebody else is there that actually will listen, because you write enough and you figure nobody's listening, and then somebody actually does, and you're a lot farther along than you think you are. So
yeah, we hear a lot of stories at our store in regards to that 6 to 8 year journey.
Yeah.
And many new authors don't realize that. How about for you, Kate? How about your journey?
So my background, I did undergrad and grad school in creative writing, but it was poetry for adults. And then I want to say it was maybe 15 years ago or so that I switched over to children's lit, that I realized that was my home. There was always, and there's so many overlaps between picture books and poetry, but that's when I had switched over to picture books, and I definitely followed the 6 to 8 years of rejections. I remember not even telling people I was doing it, because you don't want to constantly for years to keep saying like, no, yeah, just a lot of no's. And that is one thing that I think people don't realize, that anybody who has gone the traditional route has been rejected for years. And that there's something that I don't know. I think it's easy to think people just land on their feet when we've been rejected for years, but that we loved it so much that we persevered. So, and then I did my first couple books without an agent. Now I have an agent, but I was somebody who was pulled out of the slush pile by Kate O'Sullivan at Houghton Mifflin. I love working with her, and I will always feel indebted to her. I'll make her listen to this now, but it was one of those romantic stories where they said you have a 1% chance or something, but that's what made it freeing. It's kind of like what Frank said. It's when I felt alone with my work, and I felt like, well, nobody will read this. It was weird that it was like, okay, I can submit this, nothing's gonna happen, and then something did, and it was Real Cowboys got pulled out of the slush pile. So people do get pulled out of the slush pile.
Thanks, Kate. How about for you, Mark? What's your journey?
So I'm in the beginning of the 6 to 8 year mark here. I've actually only self-published. I haven't been actually been published yet, and so I'm yeah, I've got a long road ahead of me, I'm sure. But as far as why I got into it, I guess is I love to write. I really do, and it's always been a passion for me, and I try to instill that in my kids, and unfortunately they don't have that same passion. But so I figured maybe I'll write a book and that'll get the passion in them. But so I just figured, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. I never even heard of self-publishing really until about a year ago, and I thought, well, I'll try that route. At least I can have something out there. So I'm still in the early stages. So pray for me.
That's right. And I love that you have then your family at least a part of that journey as well. Yeah, with the illustrations and whatnot.
Yeah.
Rebecca, how about for you?
Yes, I can relate to Mark a little bit there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I've also done the self-publishing journey. That's kind of the route I've taken, which I think is really neat that that's an option, you know, now. And I actually, like I said, wrote this book in high school and then kind of, you know, put it on the side because it was just a fun hobby. And then in 2017, I had published my first book called Raw: Inner Workings of a Reawakened Soul, which is an adult book about theological questions, like a conversational approach to theological questions. And since then, I've published 4 other books, and then I decided I wanted to bring Duster Nuffle back out. But I can relate with Frank and Kate too, just that it is very therapeutic. Like, I think, like, when you're a writer, you find a lot of comfort, and like it's a very healthy creative outlet, and it just like is a nice way to just express what's on your heart or think through things or whatever. So it just ends up being just a fun journey, I think, regardless of where you go. And that's why I think if you do get the rejections, you just have it in your heart so much that you just can't not write. You know, it just doesn't, you miss writing even if it's only for a couple people or whatever you feel like it lands to. It's just on your heart. Mm-hmm. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. Samuel, I'm curious, were you always a reader? Were you a reluctant? We see both come in our store. Is there a particular children's book that has stuck with you?
Well, when I was growing up, you know, as I said, I had a lot of Anansi stories. And in Ghana, Anansi stories are, you know, I said everywhere you go, you know, in school, and also it's part of our oral tradition. And growing up, I really like this story, Robinson Crusoe. I don't know if you've read it before, but it was a very good story. You know, I was a reader, but then as a child, I preferred to play with my friends, right? So my dad, you know, was of the idea of trying to make sure I excel in my academics. So he sent me to a library to get a book to read, mostly like every week, right? And typically in the past, when he asked me to go to the library, what I did was to get the smallest book I can find in the library, because I knew by so doing, I'll be able to complete reading it so quickly, right? And one day he caught up to, you know, the tricks I was playing, and he asked me to go and find the biggest book I can find. And that's when I came across Robinson Crusoe when I was about 8 years old, you know. So that book really had an influence on my life. And actually, I can tell you some of the, initial, verse of the book, right? He says something to the effect of, I was born in York, a city in the northern part of England. My father, now very old, has given me a very good education. He wanted me to become a lawyer, but I was determined to go to sea. So in a way, I can connect with Robinson Crusoe because my dad, ensured that I got a very good education. He wanted me to be a medical doctor, but I chose to be an engineer and a children's book author.
That's great. It's wonderful when you, as a young person, can connect very early on. I've heard stories like, for example, with Jason Reynolds, who's prominent in the children's book literature industry, where it took him up until the age of 17 to really connect. But
Yes.
once that connection is made, then there are a lot of doors that open up. Frank, reluctant reader, a reader, favorite text?
I think I was more on the Samuel level, and then I picked the smallest books I could find. That's probably why I do this. This is probably why this worked out, because the really long ones were never, like I hit age 6 and books kind of took a massive dive until about age 30, way out. So yeah, reluctant, I guess was, it's a good way of putting that. It took a while to, growing up in the States when I was a kid, late 80s or early 90s, it was a really visual time. We were really pumped with TV and movies and all this kind of stuff. And you don't want to miss out. There was some great cartoons when we were kids. But I always remember the children's books. Always. They always stayed with me. And like I said earlier, I liked the off-the-wall stuff, a little bit more oddball. Things like, my favorite was a Scratch and Sniff Christmas book, and my kids all have a copy of it because I love it. And it smells a little different now. It might have changed the paper or the scent, but it's, as an adult, I'm like, is that Norwich? What is that? Or is that chocolate? I don't know, but they stuck with me. That's for sure. There's a lightness to them that I always liked, and text. I think it's called Scratch Stiff Christmas, or
yeah,
it's
Sweet
great.
Smells of Christmas.
Sweet Smell of Christmas. That's
yeah,
what it's
Catherine
called, and that was a favorite of mine. I always
Still-
loved it. Mine, the Scratch Sniff was white because it was just scratched through to absolutely nothing. But yeah, those things stuck around. Like you couldn't find Jimmy ate his bow, or the bow ate the wash, Jimmy's bow ate the wash anymore. I had to really deep dive for that one to give for the kids. But I married someone with connections in that world, so it was kind of it was good to know that. So
yeah. That's interesting talking about growing up in the 80s. I was fairly reluctant myself. And then I came across this series called USSA, which is when the Soviet Union takes over the United States and there's a resistance. And that played completely into 80s rhetoric.
what age level is that for?
It was a middle grade. So it was our middle reader, I should say, 8 to 12. Yeah. How about for you, Kate?
Oh man, I loved books from the start. My parents always say that, normally when a toddler gets really quiet, you kind of check on them because they're up to no good. And my parents have these stories that obviously I don't remember, but they said they would find me just sitting very, very carefully turning the pages of a book. Like they never ripped a book. And it's funny because I know I talked about how books connect us all, but I was one of 4 kids. And I think I really loved books because I could be alone. I would go behind a chair, or so even before I could read, I could follow along with the pictures. And it gave me a real sense of power and agency because I could have an adventure on my own, or with another. And I actually have we had all these kind of golden books. And this actually, I loved, this is,
Oh my gosh.
my little hands held this. Look at the duct tape. It was A Day on the Farm. I loved this book. And you can see how we fought. That's my brother and
Oh my
sisters. We fought
out
so much
names.
over. And if you just, we wouldn't have conversations. We would just scribble out somebody's name and put in your, and then you would just put it back on the shelf and it was yours. But the joke's on them. Look,
Mhm.
Amy, Chad, in my house. So, but I loved this book. And I think, you know, it's funny reading it now. It's just about just the typical day on a farm. And I'm now realizing, gosh, I've talked about chickens and now I have this. I loved how a lot of picture books kind of celebrated the ordinary and they made it seem extraordinary and magical. And so it's just a book about what happens in a typical day on a farm. But I loved it. I mean, I'm sure my parents got sick of reading it, but I still have it. It's falling apart, but yeah.
All right, so you have chickens. Are there other animals? Is this book going to influence you more?
I mean, it's possible. They have chickens, a turkey, and ducks. I didn't even
Okay.
turkey, but it's getting out of control. But yeah, how could it not? Right.
Mark, how about for you?
Along with the other guys, I wasn't a big reader either. I enjoyed it as a kid, and then I don't know, just kind of phased away until maybe early 20s. And even then, I didn't really get into a lot of fiction. I like theology and stuff like that, like Rebecca's talking about. I like looking at philosophies. I like educational things. But you know, as a kid, I loved poetry books. I loved things like, what is it, Tiki Tiki Tembo, things like that. I love those type of, have a beat to them and stuff. And so, you know, that's kind of what inspired me to write some of this stuff is using education. Now, my first book is really crazy. There's not a whole lot of education in it. It's definitely off the wall, but the other ones, you know, I'm writing towards things that educate kids, but in a fun way to where they can learn. And, you know, like I was saying earlier, parents can connect with them in a different method. But yeah, I just, I never really hit the fiction for me. I don't know. I guess I'd rather watch a movie when 80s, 90s kids again, I guess. So.
Thanks, Mark. And Rebecca, reluctant, a reader?
Very much so. I like Charlotte's Web was like my favorite book to high school, which is like a third grade reading level. No, I just read like Boxcar Children for the Book It program because you could get pizza, and I just was like determined to get the pizza. But that was like, it was like a struggle. I did not like it, and I think my parents always thought, oh no, she's never gonna like reading, but I liked writing. Like I remember doing that when I was young and enjoying like the creative nature of that, but I hated reading. And it wasn't until like I had watched, I think it's called The Count of Monte Cristo. I had watched the movie and we had to do it like senior year, read it. And I did like cliff notes for the first half and the movie. And then I like read like maybe the last 100 pages or the last half. And I'm like, wow, this is actually really fun. I actually enjoy reading. And it finally like clicked. And then I started finding like the genre. Everybody talked about, oh, you got to find your genre that you like. And I was like, I don't even think that'll matter, but it did. After that, then I settled into things that I liked to read. And now I have so many books that I got to like stop myself to say, okay, like you got to finish a few before you can move on and buy some other ones to read. And I love reading. It's such a joy now. So it was kind of a newfound love after like around college time. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I don't recall what Jason Reynolds read, but he said, yeah, after that, finding that genre is an important piece. For me, I took a break after USSA and then found science fiction. There's a particular version of science fiction called cyberpunk, and that was it for me. But finding that genre is important. So we've mentioned in passing, you know, because we're still all dealing with it. You know, we've had a year and a half or more of a pandemic, and we have had, at least for some members of society, this idea of really kind of understanding social justice and reform. But there's still so much work to do. How do you think children's literature can make a difference in the lives of both children, their caregivers, families, and societies? So what do you think? I'll start off with you, Frank. What do you think children's literature offers folks that are readers and reluctant readers, that with so many things going on in the world today? Oh.
There's a lot of layers to that question.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you my experience over the past year, and you can kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
When we first started to lock down, I wrote a book in Lindsay Illustrated. It was called I Am Not Sick. And we gave it away for free. It's on my website. And we wanted kids not to worry, not to panic, not to do what it seemed like everyone else was doing at the time, with the world is falling apart and the sky is falling and the whole deal. And that's really what children's books is to me. It's a lightness. It's representative of who the readers are. They're children, they're kids, they're pure, they're uncorrupted, they're everything that adults aren't, everything that politics aren't, everything that we see every day isn't. They're a base, and we build that base. And like I said, the last year it's been tough. I mean, my kids started off on a screen like this, and they couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We did it for 2 months, and after that, the possibility of it, I'd rather throw the thing out the window. We'll figure it out. So I actually homeschooled my kids this year because I wasn't going to do it. I know that's not an option for everybody, but I wanted to make it really light for them, even though it was really heavy for me and my wife and everybody else, a lot of the adults. And that's what the books do. It creates a lightheartedness. It creates a way to get them through tough situations, and maybe they're not completely focused on it. Yeah, we put out message, and sometimes that message, it can be a little bit much, but something that I really wanted to focus on is getting kids to laugh. Hearing my kids laugh lightens the day, makes it worth getting through. And as we move forward, that's really what I want to be a part of in this industry, is making kids laugh. As far as the books go, there's a lot of different messages out there, and there's some great ones, and we're seeing that now. Anything to make them smile, make them laugh, make them feel like they matter, anything to make them feel like they're an individual, and that they can do things that we do. We go into a lot of schools, or have in the past, not anymore, hopefully again, and kids don't know that this job exists. They don't think it's real. It's like it's made up. And we want to tell them, this is real. You could do this. It takes a lot of work, and you're gonna get pretty beat down, but anything's possible. You just have to try really hard, make it work. But yeah, if we give them anything, that would be it. So.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about at our store about this, creating a safe space and celebrating that joy and that happiness that you were alluding to or speaking to specifically. It's really important. Kate, how about your thoughts on this matter?
Frank, I love that answer, by the way. So I'm still thinking about you're so right. There's so many layers, because we have, we had grief from the pandemic, and we're in such desperate need for social reform. And one of the things, when I was thinking about this, is one of the things I love about picture books is how they walk the tightrope between what is, like what really is in the world, and what can be and what should be. And I think that space that occupies both of those things at the same time is also where we need to be and where we need to sit when we're thinking about social reform and grief. I think one of the things that we've heard a lot is, you know, if something doesn't affect someone personally, then they don't pay attention to it, right? Or they don't care. And one of the things that I love about children's books, and really all books, is that I think it puts us in the practice of caring and of noticing, both in terms of empathy, where we are in that character's shoes, and in terms of compassion, where, you know, maybe we're, and it could be, the protagonist could be a hippo, it could be, you know, but we're not that, but we care. And I think that's something that I would love to see more of in the world, is that compassion and caring about someone other than ourselves. And I do think that picture books kind of put us in that position, right? We follow a protagonist obstacle and we care about that obstacle, and we wonder how it's going to be removed and what role we can play in that. So I think that's one of the things that it's kind of done for me, but it's been very hard. I know kind of what Frank was saying, there's just been such darkness. And so I know for a long time I had trouble writing at all and doing anything creative. So I think that I keep talking to other writers who had a hard time, because you want to think about, you know, what lifts people in the world. And so if anything, though, it was a good practice because it forced me to find it again in order to be able to create.
Thanks, Kate. How about your thoughts, Mark?
So I think adults should read more children's literature, to be honest with you. I think it would help a lot with them too, because it puts things in simplistic terms a lot. And I think another thing too is that people don't realize how smart children are. It amazes me some of the deep truths that I see children pick up. It's just, it baffles my mind. And I think a lot of that, I mean, it's all theory in my here, but is due to, you know, they don't have a lot of bias created. And, you know, when you're 30, 40, 50 years old, you've had bias that have just built up over the years. So children are really open-minded and they're fresh for learning that stuff. So I think I think there could be more areas where deeper truths could be taught to children that needs to be stressed on. And the other thing is just the encouragement of of getting kids reading more helps them make more educated decisions and stuff, as opposed to just sitting in front of the TV and just being fed whatever is being told from whoever. Having that, you know, that understanding of reading and studying more, they can make more educated decisions and hopefully better the world in that case. So
absolutely. I think children's literature can tap into those, either thinking more deeply if it's a longer text, or then being able to address very directly those truths that you're speaking to, Mark. So thank you. How about for you, Rebecca?
So kind of related to my book, like I had said, I wrote this years ago, and then my friend from church, she illustrated it, and I called her up, planning on doing this before COVID, and then we started working on it as COVID has, you know, unfolded, and then all the other things that have happened within 2020 and 2021 even. But as we were working through it in 2020, it was kind of interesting because there were like themes of like diversity and working together and working with people who aren't like you already in it. And so to me, it was kind of a God thing, because it was like, I didn't plan the timing of that. You know, I don't remember like intentionally like thinking through those higher level things, you know, as a high schooler writing it. I was just enjoying the process of being creative. And so then I remember as we were both working on it, it kind of struck us both that, wow, this is like really good for this season of where we're at in society, because there's this idea of working together with your neighbor, and being with those that maybe don't think the same as you or look the same as you or are the same as you, and helping one another out, and then turning towards God and finding hope in the middle of crisis, or in the middle of concern or fear or just upheaval. And so I just thought that was just kind of something that caught us by surprise and ended up being timely. And I can only think, well, you know, God knew, like he knew how I was gonna plan this, but you know, why this maybe wouldn't be so good for 2019, but it would be for 2020. And so so anyway, I think, like, again, these picture books and children's books are a forum to speak those truths, like you guys were talking about, to young minds who can hear that and receive that and have that innocence to kind of build on that. And so hopefully this is an encouragement to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Samuel, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are very simple. You know, the stories help mold the characters of children, right? So it's important that children's book authors think about how they can mold the characters of, you know, the young readers. One thing that is very common in this world, and it's something that people say all the time, that you have to believe in the golden rule, right? It's easy to say, but it's very difficult to practice. You know, when we get to the point where, Bryan, I can see myself in you, and you can see yourself in me, then we can solve any problem in the world. Because if I'll not harm myself, I'm not going to harm you, right? So that's the social part of things. But when it comes to the pandemic, right? And when you listen to what's going on in the media, all you hear about is people dying. And it's very sad, right? But it's because in our culture and in the cultures across the world, death is looked at as something very negative, right? But really, it's part of life. Death is part of life. As long as you're alive, you're going to die. We have a proverb in Ghana that goes something like this: you are not better than the rock. And what does that mean? It means a human being cannot outlive a rock, right? So when you get to understand that living and death are part of the same spectrum, they are on the opposite ends, but they are part of the same spectrum. And when you are able to consciously, you know, agree to this very fact, which is a universal truth, then you start looking at death not in a negative light, but also in a positive light. Because for the world to get the, you know, change of mind, that kind of revolution or that kind of evolution, that moves us in a positive way, the old thinking has to die, right? And the new thinking has to be born. Children today are more intelligent than they were maybe 100 years ago or several years ago. And they are exposed to so many things. And as long as you expose your children to a diverse environment, you know, you let them experience things which are out of the ordinary. You let them, you know, see themselves in other people, then we are able to solve any problem in the world. And children's books play a major role in doing some of these things. Frida and I, you know, thought of the concept or the story idea behind A Kite for Malia in 2019 when we visited Ghana. And as I said, it deals with the idea of, you know, death, but then in a very delicate way, which a child can understand. And in a positive light, right? So that you don't subscribe or assign negative connotation to the idea of dying, because every living thing will die.
Thank you, Samuel. Well, rounding out my questions, and this doesn't have to be necessarily book related for all of you, but I'm curious, what's next? What's next for you, Frank?
Okay, what's next? I was prepared with book stuff, but well,
You can put whatever.
Let's do some other stuff real quick.
Yeah.
I got ducks coming on Tuesday through the
Real
mail.
ducks?
Yeah, ducklings. Apparently they send them through the mail. I called and said, let me go pick them up. And they said, no. And I said, why not? Well, they come in the mail. And I said, I'll offer to drive and pick them up. Why? Okay, so it turned into a thing. And that was like 4 weeks ago. So now the ducks are coming through the mail on Tuesday. I had to build the house because we have coyote and fox in the neighborhood. But I got to do the fence. So that's what's up next. Oh, and Lindsay has me doing baskets, hanging baskets for the front of the house. So I got to drill those in today.
There you go.
As far as a book stuff, so I wrote a sequel to How to Build a Haunted House, and it was a Christmas story. And we'll see if that's kind of in a waiting pattern. And then we just pitched something yesterday that we loved, and we'll see. It's again waiting pattern. It's called Sharks Love Hugs.
Nice.
And then we have a moving book that's also kind of up in the air. Will any of this stuff pan out? I don't know. We'll see. But there's a lot of stuff. I went the opposite route on the pandemic thing, where I just had to write. So we had a ton of stuff that was put together, and a lot of weird things that made its way through. So I don't know. I guess these kind of events are what make you who you are. But I'm sure they're gonna have a lot of effect on literature and movies and culture for years to come.
Yeah.
Trying to stay as far away as from the sick and virus stuff as possible, and went with funnier tones. So yeah, that's what's next.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, fingers crossed. How about for you, Kate?
In terms of books, my next book's coming out about a year from now. It's Courage Hats with Chronicle Books, and I did that with Jessica Bagley. So spring of 2022. In terms of life and ducklings as well, I'm gonna go, my kids had some ducklings hatch, and it's their first experience using an incubator. And so I'm going to go hold ducklings after this, like right after this.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And for you, Mark?
So along with that theme, my wife would love if I got chickens, but unfortunately I don't have a big enough yard. And she keeps trying to talk me into buying the lot behind us, so we do. But right now, zoning, which I wouldn't be against it, but she would love if we had chickens. Book-wise, I'm working on another poetry book with another long, crazy title on the computers, so laptops, things of that sort. So another trying to hit a niche, and parents can bond with their kids if they're all into computers. So, and then see where we go from there.
Great. And you, Rebecca?
I don't have any ducklings or chickens coming, so I'm sorry to disappoint. We do need to get mulch down.
There you go.
So it's a lot of yard work, that's for sure. But I would like to keep building out Duster Nuffle. It's been a joy working with it again. So I just did like a Duster Nuffle Easter, just like a email, social media thing. And that was a lot of fun. And I would like to do a Duster Nuffle Christmas and just other things that the Dustanians get into to help teach some of those life lessons in fun ways. And then I have a manuscript out for a Joel Bible study. So that was been a fun deep dive into the book of Joel from the Bible. And so I've kind of in the process of getting that prepped and ready to get released soon. It's in the hands of some beta readers, and it's been exciting. It's been fun to work on.
Nice. And for you, Samuel?
Well, Bryan, as you know, my my first book was Miesse's Scrapbook, which was published by Lantana Publishing in the UK, and that was in 2019, right? And Frida and I are expecting for A Kite for Malia to be released on the 30th of May in 2021. We also have another book which we are working on, which is entitled Milko. This is about a boy who lives in Bolivia. His mom is from Ethiopia and his dad is from Bolivia, right? And his mom is now in Ethiopia, for some reason. And Milko is, kind of like missing his mom. So it's about, a family unit, a beautiful family unit where, a child is feeling, kind of like, why is mom in Ethiopia? Why is she not here? So we are working on that, and that should be published maybe within 2 years. So that's what we have going on in terms of books, and it will be published by Chasing the Spider Publishing.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to our hour. Thank you so much to all of you that have joined us today. And thanks again to our panelists, Rebecca Greenfield, Kate Hoefler, Mark Miesse, Samuel Narh, and Frank Tupta, excuse me. Thank you also to our festival sponsors and partners. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us. Please check out Ohioana's website for all of this year's festival programming. And again, so wonderful to be here with all of you this morning. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.